ever-evolving soap opera that is, of course, what's happening over at Royal Lodge.
So damaging about this email is that it actually highlights the cynicism in which he's approached this.
What's happened with Andrew losing his title and now her losing Duchess of York, it just proves that the York brand is totally toxic.
There is a no-holds-barred, warts-and-all tell-all story waiting to be shared with the world.
A luxury property manager walked into Prince Andrew's Swiss villa for a routine inspection and discovered a door that didn't exist on any blueprint she'd ever been given, protected by the kind of lock that whispered secrets louder than any alarm system. And when Swiss authorities finally opened that door 72 hours later, they found 7 filing cabinets containing 30 years of hidden documents, offshore financial records, and photographs so compromising that Buckingham Palace would later describe it as an institutional crisis capable of shaking the foundations of the monarchy itself. Marie-Claire Dubois had managed luxury properties in Verbier for 17 years and had seen every kind of wealth the ultra-rich could display. But the moment she saw that hidden door at the end of a corridor behind what should have been a simple bedroom wall, her pulse quickened because she recognized the architecture of concealment, the deliberate invisibility that wasn't about protecting jewelry or sentimental heirlooms, but about hiding something that demanded absolute secrecy. But here's what makes this discovery genuinely devastating. The files weren't just evidence of poor judgment or reckless friendships. They were proof of a parallel life lived in deliberate secrecy, organized with such meticulous precision that it could only mean one thing. Prince Andrew had been preparing for the moment when scrutiny would come, when his family might abandon him, and he had compiled everything he believed would protect him when the walls finally closed in. Except what he hadn't anticipated was that those very files would become the evidence that destroyed him. Once you understand what those filing cabinets actually contained, why the financial records traced approximately £12 million through offshore accounts in jurisdictions famous for opacity, and what the handwritten notes revealed about Andrew's mindset when he wrote that, if they attempt to cast him aside, they will discover he is not without defenses. You'll realize this wasn't just a royal scandal. It was deliberate insurance aimed inward at his own family. A form of blackmail that would ultimately expose not just one prince, but the entire system that enabled him. Marie-Claire Dubois had managed luxury properties in Verbier for 17 years. She knew intimately the rhythm of empty chalets, the particular silence that settles when billionaires leave their mountain fortresses vacant between ski seasons. But stepping into Prince Andrew's Swiss villa that February morning in 2023, something felt fundamentally wrong. The air carried weight she couldn't quite articulate. She moved methodically through rooms filled with wealth that seemed almost obscene in its sheer abundance. Persian rugs worth more than most family homes. Venetian chandeliers frozen mid-sparkle. Paintings whose signatures alone commanded 7-figure prices at auction. Yet none of this disturbed Dubois. Extreme wealth was familiar territory in Verbier, where the global elite maintained vacation properties worth tens of millions. It was the door that changed absolutely everything. Hidden at the corridor's end, behind what should have been a simple bedroom wall, according to every blueprint she'd been provided, stood a door that did not exist in any official documentation. The lock mechanism was not decorative or symbolic. It was serious, industrial grade, the kind of sophisticated security that whispered secrets louder than any alarm system could shout. Dubois felt her pulse quicken involuntarily. She had encountered this pattern before during her 17-year career. The architecture of concealment, the deliberate invisibility, the calculated effort to hide something behind layers of security. This was absolutely not about protecting jewelry collections or sentimental family heirlooms. This was about hiding something that demanded absolute secrecy from everyone, including perhaps especially the Duke of York's own family. Her first call went immediately to the Duke's London legal team. Their response came too quickly, too rehearsed, too practiced to be spontaneous. "Leave the door alone," they instructed with barely concealed urgency. "Personal items only, family matters, nothing of concern." But Dubois had learned over nearly 2 decades to read fear in people's voices, and these expensive lawyers were genuinely afraid of what might be behind that door. Within 72 hours, Swiss authorities arrived at the villa with professional locksmiths, formal legal documents authorizing entry, and the kind of quiet, bureaucratic determination that precedes revelations no one genuinely wants to face. When the sophisticated lock mechanism finally surrendered after considerable effort, the door opened onto a windowless room measuring approximately 20 square meters. Climate-controlled, meticulously preserved like a museum vault designed to protect priceless artifacts from degradation. The scent hit the investigation team first. Leather and paper, carefully maintained through environmental controls, meticulously protected from humidity and temperature fluctuations. Then they saw exactly what the room contained, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. 7 tall filing cabinets arranged with almost military precision. Each drawer carefully labeled, each folder systematically dated, each document suggesting a story the Duke of York had never wanted publicly told. What they discovered inside those cabinets would send genuine shockwaves far beyond the snow-draped Alps. The documents stretched across 30 years of hidden activity, a comprehensive archive of a parallel life. Financial records routed through offshore accounts in jurisdictions internationally famous for opacity and banking secrecy. Correspondence with individuals whose names appeared repeatedly in international investigations into corruption, money laundering, and influence peddling. Businessmen with documented connections to arms deals, figures entangled in serious legal controversies, power brokers whose influence operated exclusively in shadows the public never saw. Then came the photographs, and this is where the discovery became genuinely devastating. Some appeared relatively harmless at first glance. Group shots at exclusive parties, casual moments at private estates, the kind of social documentation wealthy people maintain. But others were shockingly compromising in ways that immediately raised legal questions. They were arranged in albums with careful labels, organized systematically by date and location, curated as if for a purpose far more strategic than merely sentimental. But the most devastating collection emerged from the deepest drawer, the one requiring an additional key. Evidence connecting Prince Andrew to Jeffrey Epstein at a level far deeper than any public admission had ever acknowledged. Flight logs that directly contradicted official timelines and palace statements. Payment records routed through intermediaries designed to obscure the actual source. Printed messages showing a friendship built on mutually beneficial arrangements that investigators would later describe in official reports as uncomfortably coordinated. The Swiss investigative team worked in complete silence, photographing every document, logging every item, documenting every action with measured deliberation. They understood immediately the magnitude of what they had uncovered. This was not simply storage of old documents. This was insurance, a comprehensive vault of knowledge compiled systematically over decades, meant to shield its owner from threats both known and unknown. The British Embassy in Bern was notified within hours of the discovery. What followed remains partly concealed behind diplomatic agreements and national security classifications that may never be fully declassified. But one fact became absolutely undeniable to everyone who saw those files spread across examination tables in secure facilities. The discovery in Prince Andrew's bedroom vault was not merely another royal scandal to be managed. It was an institutional crisis capable of genuinely shaking the foundations of the British monarchy itself. Because hidden behind that bedroom wall was not just evidence of poor personal judgment or reckless friendships with morally compromised individuals. It was comprehensive proof of a parallel life lived in deliberate secrecy over decades, a life where royal privilege became simultaneously shield and weapon. A life documented with such meticulous precision that it could only mean one thing to investigators. Prince Andrew had been actively preparing for this moment of reckoning. He had known scrutiny would eventually come. He had expected potential betrayal from those closest to him. And so he had systematically collected, organized, and preserved everything he believed might protect him when institutional walls finally closed in. But what he apparently had not anticipated was that those very files, locked away in his most private space, would become the primary evidence that ultimately destroyed him. To understand why Andrew created this archive of insurance, You need to understand the psychology of the boy who grew up believing the world owed him substantially more than it gave. Andrew Albert Christian Edward was born on February 19, 1960, the third child and second son of Queen Elizabeth II. From his first breath, he occupied a peculiar position in the royal hierarchy, close enough to the throne to carry its psychological weight, far enough never to wear its crown. He was the spare to the heir, the child who existed primarily as insurance, the boy whose entire purpose was defined by his older brother's survival. And in that strange, liminal position, something inside Andrew began to calcify, a resentment that would harden over decades into the man who eventually built that secret room. His childhood was not overtly unhappy, but it was profoundly lonely. Charles, 13 years older, was already being systematically groomed for eventual kingship when Andrew learned to walk. Princess Anne, 10 years his senior, had carved her own distinctive path of independence and duty. By the time Andrew arrived, the palace machinery had refined its processes for raising royal children. He was raised not primarily by his mother, but by professional nannies and tutors who prepared him methodically for a life of ceremonial irrelevance. Queen Elizabeth loved him in her particular way, but Elizabeth's way was shaped fundamentally by duty rather than warmth. Affection came in scheduled moments. Approval was earned exclusively through obedience and proper performance. Andrew learned early that love in the royal family was transactional. You performed your assigned role correctly and you received acknowledgement. You failed and you faced silence. He craved attention desperately. As a teenager, Andrew was the loud one, the show-off, the prince who needed everyone to know he was in the room. Where Charles was introspective and Anne was disciplined, Andrew was brash and attention-seeking. He compensated for his structural position by demanding recognition through other means. The military gave him what the palace never could. When Andrew joined the Royal Navy in 1979, he finally found a place where his title mattered substantially less than his capability. He trained as a helicopter pilot. He served in the Falklands War in 1982, flying genuinely dangerous missions that earned him legitimate respect. For the first time in his life, Andrew was not the spare. He was a serviceman who had proven himself under actual fire. Those years fundamentally shaped his identity. He returned from the Falklands as Randy Andy, the playboy prince whose romantic escapades filled tabloids with delighted coverage. He dated actresses. He partied in exclusive clubs. He married Sarah Ferguson in 1986, in a ceremony watched by millions globally. For a brief moment, Andrew seemed to have everything, but the marriage unraveled quickly. The demands of royal life clashed with Sarah's free spirit. Andrew's naval career kept him away for months at a time. The couple had 2 daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, but distance and fundamental incompatibility eroded what affection existed. By 1992, their separation was formalized. By 1996, the divorce was final. Andrew's public image fractured. The playboy prince became the divorced disappointment. His military service ended. His marriage collapsed. His purpose within the royal family grew increasingly unclear. And in that vacuum, something genuinely dangerous took root, a belief that he fundamentally deserved more than he was receiving. In 2001, Andrew was appointed as the UK's Special Representative for International Trade and Investment. The role seemed perfect. It gave him purpose, status, and the global stage he desperately craved. He traveled extensively, meeting heads of state, courting business leaders, opening doors for British commerce. But the role also gave him something more dangerous: access. Access to powerful people who existed in moral grey zones. Access to deals that blurred lines between diplomacy and personal gain. Access to relationships that would later become his undoing. One of those relationships was with Jeffrey Epstein. They met in 1999, introduced through Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of the disgraced media tycoon Robert Maxwell. Epstein was charming, wealthy, extraordinarily well-connected. He offered Andrew entry into elite American circles, private jets, luxurious estates, influential contacts. Andrew accepted eagerly. What he did not ask, or deliberately chose not to see, was how Epstein had actually built his wealth and connections, the trafficking, the systematic abuse, the exploitation of young girls that would eventually expose Epstein as one of the most notorious predators of the modern era. But by the time the truth became undeniable, Andrew was already deeply entangled. He had flown on Epstein's plane multiple times. He had stayed at Epstein's properties. He had been photographed with Epstein's victims, including Virginia Giuffre, who would later accuse Andrew of sexual abuse when she was 17. Andrew denied everything consistently. He claimed complete ignorance. He insisted his friendship with Epstein was merely a mistake in judgment, nothing more sinister. He gave a disastrous interview to the BBC in 2019, attempting to clear his name, but instead cementing public perception of his guilt through bizarre explanations and a complete lack of empathy for Epstein's victims. The palace tried desperately to contain the damage. Andrew stepped back from public duties. His military titles were quietly suspended. He became a ghost within the institution, present but invisible, protected but increasingly toxic. And somewhere during those years of escalating scrutiny and mounting accusations, Andrew made a calculated decision. He would protect himself. If the palace abandoned him, if his family turned away, if the public demanded his exile, he would not go quietly. He would not face consequences alone. He had spent decades building relationships, witnessing transactions, accumulating knowledge. And so he began to systematically organize it all. The files, the photographs, the correspondence, the financial records, everything that proved he had not acted alone, everything that suggested others had known, had participated, had benefited from the same systems he had used. He stored it all behind a bedroom wall in a villa, far from London, a vault of insurance against the day the monarchy decided he was expendable. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.